First, the USDA's Justice for All non-discriminatory statement, which simply states that all persons must be treated equally without regard to their race, color, national origin, sex, religious creed, disability, age, political beliefs, or reprisal or retaliation for prior civil rights activity, and that our institution provides an inclusive space for all. For more information on the And Justice for All statement, please visit the USDA's website.
Hey everybody, welcome to this edition of the Family Foodie. My name is Maddie and I am a nutrition educator for the Rutgers Cooperative Extension of Mercer County, the Department of Family and Community Health Sciences, and SNAP-Ed. So glad you could join us. This week, we are launching a series of videos where we are discussing this food group on the My Plate symbol, grains. So let's get into it. The first thing that we want to discuss when it comes to grains is the difference between a whole grain and a refined grain. On the left in this picture, you can see a picture of a whole grain. A whole grain includes the bran that's filled with fiber and B vitamins and minerals, the endosperm that is the starchy carbohydrate middle layer with some proteins and vitamins, and the germ, which is a nutrient-packed core with B vitamins, vitamin E, phytochemicals, and healthy fats. On the right-hand side, we see a picture of a refined grain. The refining process takes away the bran and the germ, along with much of the fiber and many of the phytochemicals and vitamins and minerals that we find in grain foods. While many of those vitamins and minerals are added back into the refined grain during the fortification process, we do encourage that people try and make at least half of the grain foods that they eat daily whole grains. Whole grains include things like barley, brown rice, buckwheat, bulgur or cracked wheat, millet, oatmeal, popcorn, whole wheat bread, pasta or crackers, and wild rice. Today we're continuing our discussion on grains by discussing the differences between whole grains and refined grains, and specifically some of the benefits that whole grains have in store for us. Let's get into the lesson. When it comes to finding whole grain products in the grocery store, it's important to pay attention to the ingredients list. If the first ingredient on the item includes any of these grain products, then the item is a whole grain. The items include brown rice, buckwheat, bulgur, millet, oatmeal, popcorn, quinoa, rolled oats, whole grain barley, whole grain corn, whole grain sorghum, whole grain triticale, whole grain oats or whole oats, whole rye, whole wheat, and wild rice. Again, if any of those items are the first ingredient on the ingredients list, then the product is a whole grain. It's also important to note that things like multigrain, stone ground, 100% wheat, cracked wheat, 7-grain, bran, those are all advertising tactics and don't necessarily mean that the product is a whole grain. Likewise, just because something is brown or looks like it's a whole grain does not mean it's a whole grain. It's very important to look at the first ingredient on the ingredients list. Whole grain foods provide us with many important nutrients. One of those important nutrients is fiber. Fiber is important because it slows the breakdown of carbohydrates and helps us maintain a steady blood sugar rather than causing spikes. Also, fiber helps lower cholesterol as well as move waste through the digestive tract. Fiber may also prevent the formation of small blood clots that can trigger heart attacks or strokes. Lastly, fiber can also help us feel fuller for longer. That way, we don't feel as though we need to eat as much, and this can eventually lead to weight loss. In this experiment, we'll show the difference between the refined grain bread and a whole grain bread. This seltzer water that I'm pouring over the 2 slices of bread is meant to represent the stomach acid that we have in our stomachs. That stomach acid helps to break down the food that we put into our bodies. I'm going to set my timer for 1 minute. And let's see how the bread reacts to our stomach acid. After the 1 minute is up, you'll find that the refined grain bread that has much less fiber in it is going to break apart and be pretty mushy after soaking in the seltzer water. Whereas the whole grain bread that's packed with fiber stays intact. This is demonstrating that fiber in whole grain foods helps to keep us much fuller for longer. Today we're continuing our discussion on grains, and specifically we are going to discuss an important fuel source that grains provide us with, called carbohydrates. We are also going to be doing a fun cooking demo that's packed with healthy carbohydrates to give us energy. Let's get into the lesson. Carbohydrates are the body's main fuel source. The functioning of the brain, central nervous system, and red blood cells all depend on adequate consumption of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are found in a variety of different foods, such as milk, bread, rice, corn, beans, cake, popcorn, potatoes, yogurt, and many others. Consuming enough carbohydrates is important. However, not all carbohydrates are created equal. Minimally processed carbohydrates are the healthiest choices. These sources of carbohydrates are also high in fiber, vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients. This includes foods such as whole grains, fruits and vegetables, and beans. That is why we recommend making at least half of your grains whole grains. Next, we will be demonstrating how to make these no-bake energy bites. This recipe features quick oats as its whole grain item and is full of healthy carbohydrates. Let's look at how to make them. The first ingredient that we used was 1/4 cup of a nut butter. I used peanut butter. The next ingredient was 1/3 cup of honey. Adds a little natural sweetness to our recipe. We mix that up in a medium-sized bowl. Don't forget to add your 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Next, we added our whole grain product, which were quick oats. You can use other whole grain products in here, including cereal or wheat germ. Lastly, we added some chopped dried fruit. These are chopped dried figs, and then also some chopped pecans, because I really love pecans. Once all these ingredients were incorporated, I took a tablespoon-sized amount and rolled it in my palm until it became a perfect ball. This recipe makes about 15 of these delicious bite-sized snacks that provide us with a lot of energy to keep us going throughout the day. They can be eaten at a mealtime or even in between meals to give us a little boost of energy as we go about our day. Hi everybody, welcome to this edition of the Family Foodie. My name is Maddie and I'm a nutrition educator for the Rutgers Cooperative Extension of Mercer County, the Department of Family and Community Health Sciences, and SNAP-Ed. We're so happy that you could join us today. Today we are doing our 4th and final video on grains, so we'll be discussing this section of my plate. And specifically, we're going to do a brief review of what we've discussed in the past with our other 3 videos on grains. And then we're also going to briefly discuss how to make half of our grains whole. Let's get into the lesson. In our first video, we discussed the basic differences between a whole grain and a refined grain. In a whole grain, there are 3 parts. The bran, which is a fiber-filled outer layer with B vitamins and minerals, the endosperm, which is a starchy carbohydrate, and the germ, that is a nutrient-packed core with B vitamins, vitamin E, phytochemicals, and healthy fats. During the refining process, a refined grain has removed the bran and the germ, along with the fiber, B vitamins and minerals, as well as vitamin E, phytochemicals, and healthy fats. After the refining process, you are left with the endosperm, which is the starchy carbohydrate. In our second video, we discussed how whole grains have a lot of fiber compared to refined grains. Fiber is important because it helps slow the breakdown of carbohydrates, it helps lower cholesterol and move waste through our digestive tract, and it can also help prevent the formation of small blood clots. Lastly, fiber also helps to keep us fuller for longer. When locating whole grain products in the grocery store, it is important to look for these items as the first ingredient on the product ingredient label. If these items are not the first ingredient, then the product is not a whole grain. You can also look for products that say 100% whole wheat or 100% whole grain as the first ingredient on the ingredients label. Then you know that this product is a whole grain. Whole grains provide us with a very important energy source called carbohydrates. Minimally processed carbohydrates are the healthiest choices because these sources of carbohydrates also have high fiber, vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients. We can find this type of carbohydrate in whole grains. Lastly, we made these no-bake energy bites together as an example of a healthy whole grain snack that provides us with many carbohydrates to give us energy throughout the day. In this video, we will be discussing 10 tips that you can use to make half of your grains whole grains. The first tip is to make simple shifts. So if you usually cook refined grain pasta or maybe eat white bread, try using whole grain pasta or 100% whole wheat bread, bagels, tortillas, brown rice, oatmeal, or grits. When it comes to whole grains, they can also be healthy snacks. Popcorn is a whole grain. You can make it with little or no added salt or butter. You can also try 100% whole wheat or rye crackers. Save some time when it comes to whole grains. Cook extra brown rice or oatmeal when you have time. Refrigerate it so that you can just heat it and serve it later in the week. You can also mix it up with whole grains. Use whole grains in mixed dishes such as barley in vegetable soups or stews, and bulgur wheat in casseroles or stir fries. Try quinoa salad or pilaf. You can also try whole wheat versions. Change up your favorite meal with whole grains. Try brown rice stuffing and baked green peppers or tomatoes. Try whole wheat noodles in lasagna. Whole grains are also great for baking. Experiment by substituting buckwheat, millet, or oat flour for up to half of the flour in your favorite pancake or waffle recipes. To limit saturated fat and added sugars, top with fruit instead of butter and syrup. Be a good role model for children. Set a good example for children by serving and eating whole grains every day with meals and snacks. Make sure to check the label. Most refined grains are enriched. This means that certain B vitamins and iron are added back after processing. Check the ingredients list to make sure the word enriched is included in the grain name. That is, if you're still eating the refined grains. Know what to look for on the ingredients list. So, when you're looking for whole grain products in the grocery store, read the ingredients list and choose products that name a whole grain ingredient first. Look for whole wheat, brown rice, bulgur, buckwheat, oatmeal, whole grain cornmeal, whole oats, whole rye. Lastly, be a smart shopper. The color of the food is not an indication of a whole grain food. Food that is labeled as multigrain, stone ground, 100% wheat, cracked wheat, 7 grain, or bran are usually not 100% whole grain products. So they may contain whole grain, but they're not 100% whole grain. For more videos and content like this, please follow or like us on Facebook. Thanks so much for coming, and we hope to see you next time.